Annihilation, Hereditary, Under the Skin, Beau is Afraid, and Dune Part 2. In my opinion, some of the craziest, boldest original scores of all time. And none of them got nominated for Best Original Score. Every year the Oscars come and go, and every year I'm left scratching my head asking myself why they vote the way they do. Why does innovation keep getting overlooked? There seems to be this consistent, frustrating will of the Oscars committee to choose whatever is most cinematic. Hollywood has curated a style so homogenous, so predictable, that directors and producers from all over the world are now trying to emulate it in an attempt to bait the Oscars. It's the most close-minded, frustrating pattern that I've noticed throughout the last 5 years. Because if you don't abide by these guidelines, followed with a very plump for your consideration campaign, you can completely forget about being considered. So let's mourn the snubs of these 5 films in an attempt to understand the Oscars voting attitudes. Annihilation, scored by Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury, is a film about transformation. We're treated to some intense moments throughout the film, but director Alex Garland somehow manages to keep the film from feeling sinister the way a lot of other horror films do. It subliminally communicates to us the idea that the creature, the main villain, I guess you could say, of the story, is not really a malicious creature. It's just an alien trying to make sense of its environment and trying to adjust to it. So the story leaves it to the human characters to find its actions horrifying. I think that's so clever, and it can only really work by creating this disconnect between the picture, the horrifying picture, and the serene music. By choosing to keep this major diatonic collection hovering throughout the alien sequence, creating this happy, serene feeling as we see this psychedelic imagery, it really sells us on this idea. To me, this creates an ambiguity that wonderfully raises the question of whether any event or occurrence really is the way we perceive it. Can things really be horrifying or beautiful, serene, tranquil, or violent? Or is it just our genetic memory and survival instincts connotating everything for us to keep us alive? I think the audio and the visuals working against each other is a pretty brilliant, bold decision, one that Ari Aster and Colin Stetson probably took a page out of when creating their horror classic. Hereditary, scored by Colin Stetson, is easily one of the most effective psychological horror films that I've ever seen. The music creates this ambient noise that kind of creeps in through the back until it becomes unbearable, almost making you feel like disassociated. And then there's this jarring switch into sudden silence. Navigating both ambience and drama is something that a competent composer should be able to do. However, what makes this film so interesting to me is how quick and how extreme those shifts are. The score also has this natural uniqueness to it, being that it's the only score that I can think of that it's almost entirely comprised of woodwind instruments. A uniqueness that I find important because it literally strays away from the traditional Hollywood orchestral sound. Might not sound like that big of a deal, but it's different. And if it's different, it's likely unprecedented. And if it's unprecedented, then it will probably create really weird effects on your emotions, like, I don't know, giving you a sense of resolution during one of the most horrifying endings in movie history, just to say something. Just like with Annihilation, Under the Skin wasn't nominated for anything, but it might be because it went on a festival run in 2013 and didn't get picked up for distribution until a year later, creating this weird sort of like 1 year gap. But also, if the directors, producers, cast, crew, if none of them had an AMP membership, that becomes a very self-explanatory situation. But still, Under the Skin, scored by Michael Levi, is a trip from the opening shot. The film leans a lot on ambiguity, much more than the former 2 films. And in my opinion, when someone leans into ambiguity too much in the name of high art, it can come across as snobbish or just lazy, but when done right, head scratching can feel so good. Its construction is incredibly simple. Either drones, this eerie violin sample, or dead silence. It's simple sound for a simple picture, because a great composer knows when to let the subtext of the film do the talking. Beau is Afraid, scored by Bobby Kurlick. Curl. It's like if you mix contemporary Western classical music with like 1940s Disney. It's a score that is not afraid to abandon tone keys and opt for the use of plenty of instrumental extended techniques. It's not afraid of hitting a whole bunch of points and even Mickey Mousing the characters, which is where you like match the action of the character with the music. It does all the things that I, as a younger composer, would never do, but the fact that they work just made me a little wiser, I guess. It's literally a soundtrack that you have no idea how seriously to take. And the fact that it's in a movie about anxiety, is that not like perfect? If you haven't heard about Zimmer getting disqualified with Dune Part 2, then you're probably living under a rock, or probably just don't give a shit about this sort of stuff, but let me give you the deets. The Oscars apparently have this rule that if you use music from a previous film, your entry cannot be considered for Best Original Score. And apparently it's not a rule for sequels only, it applies to films that are divided in chunks like Dune. So this might be another example of when bureaucracy crosses roads with arts, and it's just never pretty. Because there's no rules in art for definition, so making rules for art is kind of like oxymoronic, no? But I understand that for the sake of order, there need to be guidelines, especially when managing a humongous amount of people. But that rule specifically really rubs me the wrong way because music of our tradition stems from Europe. And in that style of music, the Western classical tradition is what some people call it, their reuse of material is seen as something very positive. European critics all throughout the 1800s always raved about thematic development. That's literally taking material, either a tune or a rhythmic figure from your music, a previous piece of material, and then using it and developing it throughout a large multi-part piece of music. So if the work that you're submitting is still part of a larger multi-part work, why can it not be counted as original music? It literally still is the same movie. So what are we left with? On one hand, we have this close-mindedness that stifles innovation or at least neglects to reward it. And on the other, we have this bureaucratic process full with unnecessary, not even outdated rules, just stupid rules, and pays no homage to tradition. But the ugliest truth is that the Oscars have turned into a pay-to-win game. Ever since I started getting my For Your Consideration things, I started getting tons of free merch, vinyl prints, Blu-rays of the film, like it just amounts of free shit that I didn't know I could just sign up to get. But it feels wrong that it works that way when so many people with not as many means are creating some of the most outstanding work, and it's just kind of getting like pushed under the rug. It's a popularity game at this point. Everyone votes for their friends, as I've said before, and I'm not just pulling that out of my ass. I personally know people that are actually voting members. I'm unfortunately not a voting member, and everyone just votes for who they know. Like that's kind of like the game. It's not that deep. So moral of the story, just make the art you want to make.